Hey everyone, and welcome back to WDIM News, my weekly podcast where I talk about sci-fi stuff and some other stuff. My name is Eric. Thank you very much for joining me today, where I actually have a lot of stuff to talk about for the first podcast in a while. And this is, of course, because the WGA Writers Guild of America strike is over, something I discussed in my podcast last week briefly, since it literally just happened as I was recording. So I just want to go over a little bit more with you and tell you some of the things that the writers gained from the strike, so at least you can decide whether you think it was worth it or not. Then I want to discuss some of the news that has come out from that, including a surprise update about the once-thought-dead fourth film in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek film series. I also want to talk about a wild trailer for a film that is meant to reboot another franchise before I get into my not one, not two, not three, but 4 reviews this week. I saw a sci-fi film that's available to many of us to watch right now on streaming called No One Will Save You, and with it being October, I know that some of you may want to watch a new horror movie, so this may be for you. I also watched the first 3 episodes of the new Amazon Prime series titled Gen V, which is a spin-off of their very popular series, The Boys, and I also got a chance to watch the new film, The Creator, that was just released in theaters, and I'm ready to give you my thoughts on all that. All these reviews will not include spoilers, but my final review will, and that will be of the 5th episode of the 4th season of Star Trek Lower Decks, titled In Pathological Fallacies. As always, time codes are listed below and in the description if you would like to skip around. But first, why don't you leave a like on the video, which helps out this channel a lot. And you should subscribe too, so you don't miss out on any new videos and podcasts that come out. And you should subscribe too, so you don't miss when any of my new videos and podcasts come out. So first, let's talk about the WGA strike and how it is over with. So this strike started on May 2nd of 2023 and then ended on September 27th of the same year. It is the second longest strike in WGA history, the longest being in 1988, which I don't remember because I was 9. Here are some of the things that the WGA won in their negotiations. They got increases in minimum salaries paid to writers, increased health and pension contribution rate, so that's the 401k kind of stuff, and health insurance, regulations for the use of artificial intelligence, which I'm going to talk about later in one of my reviews, improved terms for screenwriter employment, which I think has to do with like writers' rooms and stuff like that, and how many people you can have in a writer's room and how many people you are required to have, improved terms for streaming residuals, which is a big deal that I'm going to go into here in a little bit, and increased compensation for series employment, which is just raises, and increase in guaranteed minimum for writers in a writer's room for a series. I think this has to do with how writers are paid in regards to pilots versus like a series that's been on for a while. I think that like the guarantees are different there, so they switched those around. But a couple of the things that were really important was that from these terms, now AI can't write or rewrite literary material, and AI-generated material will not be considered source material. So that's pretty big. I know that that was something that the studios were really pushing for, and they're already trying to do in like sneaky little ways. And the writers picked up on that, and they said, no, you can't do that anymore. And it looks like they were able to work that out in the terms. And another thing that came from this, which is really big, is streaming data transparency, which means that shows are actually going to know how many views they get. That information is only released to the public if the streaming service wants it to be out there. I know there are some other metrics out there that they try and gauge, but I think that nobody has the true data unless it comes from the source, which is always kind of shady, especially if you're trying to negotiate your rate. Now there will be more transparency in that streaming data, and I think some of these details are still being worked out in the minutia, but in the grand scheme of things, these things have been taken care of, and the writers are now back to work as we speak, as I'm recording this podcast. Although the WGA strike is over, the SAG, the Screen Actors Guild strike, does continue. Now, I should say that representatives from the SAG union met with the Coalition of Hollywood Producers this past week, and from both sides, it looks like a deal is likely by the end of October at the latest. So that's good news. I know that initially I mentioned in my podcast that the WGA was saying that once their strike was over, they were not going to go back to work until the SAG strike was over. Well, that was one of the things that was negotiated in these terms, that the WGA did agree to go back to work. And I think that that was kind of a good faith thing because they realized that most of the things that they won in these negotiations are going to be very close or very similar to what the SAG Actors Guild are trying to get as well. And all this kind of lines up with what I've been saying for months, that the strike will end before the holiday season gets here. This weekend, in fact, some big things came out. I'm going to talk about them. That's why I have four reviews to go over. And in October, there are some other big things coming out. I know Loki is coming out on Disney Plus, and Ahsoka is coming to an end. So they're going to want to promote that series so people will go back and watch it maybe. So I know that October is kind of the start of the holiday season. So it makes a lot of sense that the producers finally seem to have caved and agreed to the writers' terms. And it does seem like the writers got more than the producers did. I don't think the producers really had a strategy. I think they were just trying to wait these people out. And then you've got, Drew Carey, Bryan Cranston, The Rock, all these people, Seth MacFarlane, donating all this money to struggling writers and actors. And it's like, well, if they're going to keep doing that, like, we're not going to be able to wait them out. Like, they're going to end up waiting us out. And of course, the holiday season is coming up here, and there'll be a lot more big stuff released in the coming months. And they're going to want the writers and the actors especially to be able to promote this stuff. So now that the WGA strike is over, hopefully the SAG strike will end soon and these people can go back to work. I think this is great news. I'm glad that the writers got what they felt was fair. It doesn't seem like a lot of people are complaining about what the writers got. I saw some some sites being like, oh, this wasn't worth it and stuff. That's why I kind of wanted to lay it out to you and let me know, do you think this was worth it? Do you think that they made good gains here? Or do you think that they're just delaying the inevitable and that AI will be here sooner or later? I know that I have gotten some comments when I've talked about this in the past, and it's made me think about some things that, maybe this is just trying to delay the inevitable. And, I've heard other people say being a writer, being an actor isn't a guaranteed living. So maybe they shouldn't be treated like that. But I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit too much of a humanist to think like that. And I do think that people should be paid, commiserate to what they do. And if what they do is great, then they should be able to do it for a job, and they shouldn't have to be waiting tables or, doing other things just to put food on their own table so they can do what they love and do what they're good at. That's, what I think. But let me know in the comments if you think that I'm wrong, if you think that this was kind of silly and we're just back to square one and sooner or later this is all going to blow up in their face again, or do you think that this was a worthwhile cause? I think you know where I stand on this, but I'd love to hear your theory on it because, like I said, I have seen some comments on my videos that made me think about some stuff, which is definitely very cool. So if you have a conflicting opinion, I would definitely like to hear it. But let me know what you think of the WGA strike being over. And do you think it was worth it? So last week, I already talked about one project that was immediately announced pretty much as soon as even a rumor of the WGA strike was out there, that we would be getting a reboot of The Office, which I have my own feelings about. And if you want to check that out, you can listen to my podcast last week, which I think was pretty good. But anyway, we also hear that Star Trek 4 may actually still be happening. Now, if you recall, Paramount removed Star Trek 4 from their release calendar a year ago. And yes, don't come at me with, what do you mean Star Trek 4? We already got Star Trek 4 with Spock and blah, blah. Yeah, I know. This is Star Trek 4, of course, from the J.J. Abrams universe, and would once again probably star Chris Pine as Captain Kirk. It's kind of unclear who else would return because, of course, a lot of the people that were in this iteration of Star Trek have now had careers that have blossomed. Carl Urban, Zoe Saldana, Chris Pine, he just directed a film, which I know has not gotten great reviews, but still, these actors have gone a long way since the last time they played these characters. So it'd be interesting to see who they'd be able to get back. But this news comes from the original co-screenwriter of Star Trek 4, which is Lindsay Anderson Beer. And she said this about the project while promoting Pet Sematary Bloodlines, her directorial debut, which is being released this week. I think it's only on Paramount Plus. I don't think that's coming to the theaters. I don't know if it's a reboot or I don't know what's going on with that movie. I haven't heard much about Pet Sematary Bloodlines. I'm not really into those movies. I like the first one. I tried the second one. I didn't really like it, and I know there have been quite a few since that. But if you do see this movie, let me know if it's worth watching, because it is October, so I'd love to watch the horror movies in October. So anyway, back to the story about Star Trek 4. This is what the writer Lindsay Anderson Beer had to say about her involvement with Star Trek 4 and where she thinks it is. Star Trek 4 it's still on track. I love that project, and it was another one that I had to hop off of to direct this movie. And that was a hard thing to do, but I love everyone involved with that project. So her script has since been rewritten by a writer named Josh Friedman, who worked on Avatar 2, and someone else named Cameron Squires, who's known for WandaVision. That was also when Matt Shakman was attached to direct this movie. And of course, he has also since left this film, and he will be directing the next Fantastic Four movie. So it's kind of been up in the air, but according to this person, she believes that this movie is still coming out. I definitely have my doubts, but we do know that one Star Trek film is definitely still in development, and that is the Section 31 film. That, of course, will be released on Paramount Plus. I don't think that that's going to get a wide release. It might be released in a few larger markets for, a couple weeks or something, but I think for the most part, it's going to be on Paramount Plus. So we know that that's coming out. I personally still don't think that Star Trek needs a feature film. I think that they have more to lose with a feature film than they do to gain. I don't think that Star Trek is ever going to be one of these big franchises. It's never going to bring in like Transformers money or MCU money or something like that. So to try and prop Star Trek up like that, I think is a bad idea. I think doing smaller feature films, it doesn't have to be the Quentin Tarantino thing, but something like that, something that's out of the box, something that's lower budget. I think that once you have these high budgets, then you have to have this high turnaround, right? You have to get that money back and you make compromises on different things. And I think that Star Trek has a ceiling. I don't think that you're ever going to get that multi-billion-dollar franchise out of Star Trek. I think that it can be a multi-hundred-million franchise for sure. I think that it can be a profitable franchise, but I think that it has to be done right. And I think, when you get a fourth film in a film series, that's when everybody gets raises anyway. And these actors already deserve raises because of everything they've done on the side. And now you're saying, well, these characters are returning for the fourth time. I know I'm going to get this much percentage, and then I'm going to get this much because of all these movies I've been in. The budget already is going to be, huge before you even put pen to paper, or you start constructing sets, or you go on location. So I think that Star Trek 4 in this iteration is a bad idea. And I think that the Section 31 film is a good idea just because it's a smaller scale project. And I think that that is better for this franchise. But, again, that's my opinion. Let me know if you have a different opinion on that in the comments below. But according to this writer, the film is still on track somewhere, probably still looking for a director. Now, the directors have not been on strike. So if Star Trek did find a director, they could have announced that, but maybe they'd like to have the cast there to announce it too. So they might be waiting for an announcement till the SAG strike is ended. So that's something that we could hear in the next coming months. So if anything does develop on that, I will definitely report it here. But those are just my feelings about the next film in that franchise. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And then real quick, before I go into my reviews, I want to talk about this crazy trailer for the reboot of the Toxic Avenger. Now, if you have no idea what this character is or what this film is, I highly suggest that you find the original movie that was released in 1984. If you can find it on VHS, even better. But it's so great. It's so 80s. It's about a lowly janitor who gets superpowers after being thrown in a toxic waste. I mean, right there, you should be in. If you're not in after that description, I don't know what to tell you. It's just got hilarious violence and bad acting, and it's just really what the 80s are all about. It's a quintessential 80s movie, in my opinion. I loved it. I probably watched it too early in my life. I probably saw it when I was younger than was meant, but I remember loving that character. The sequels, not so much. But it's a really fun film, but it looks like the character is getting a reboot. It will be released this year and be produced by Lloyd Kaufman, who created the character for Troma Studios. If you don't know, Troma Studios is actually where James Gunn came from, who is now the head of the DC Comics Studios, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. But the trailer is insane. I mean, it looks like it was filmed in the 80s, so that's kind of cool. There's a scene where this guy just gets his jaw just knocked straight off. I don't know. It's just crazy violence. And like I said, it looks like it's going to be a good time. The film will star Peter Dinklage as Winston Goose, a.k.a. the Toxic Avenger. Peter Dinklage, of course, from Game of Thrones. Now, I think it's interesting that they've renamed the character. I can't remember the name of the original character right now. Something Melton maybe was his name or something like that. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've seen the movie, but I know it wasn't Winston Goose. So I wonder if they changed the name because eventually they're going to get the original Toxic Avenger back. Because this design is way different than the original design. It's based off Peter Dinklage. In the original movie, there was a lowly little guy that turned into this huge guy in this muscle suit. And this looks very much like Peter Dinklage from the silhouette that we get. So it's definitely Peter Dinklage playing both characters. I think that's interesting. I think that perhaps maybe the idea here is that we will get the original Toxic Avenger at some point. maybe not in this movie, maybe in like the last scene or something like that. And I love Peter Dinklage. I think he's really funny in the parts that he's had where he's allowed to be funny. I think he's good. Speaking of which, Kevin Bacon and Elijah Wood also star in this movie. I love them. I think when they're kind of just given the reins to a character and like are told, just go crazy. I mean, Kevin Bacon just played an exaggerated version of himself in a Christmas special for the Guardians of the Galaxy on Disney Plus. He was hilarious. I thought he was really good. One of my favorite parts of that whole thing. So, and Elijah Wood, I mean, obviously everybody remembers him from the Lord of the Rings, but I really liked his character from Sin City, and the fact that he could slide into a character like that and also be, Frodo, I think says a lot. And I've always been a big Elijah Wood fan because of that. So I'm definitely going to see this movie. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's probably going to be really violent and really stupid and probably have a lot of bad acting. It'll be interesting to see like Peter Dinklage and Kevin Bacon and Elijah Wood be in a movie with bad acting, because you got to see the trailer. I'm going to put the trailer in the comments below. If you want to pause this and watch it, I don't care, because it's just really funny. It's going to make you laugh, and it's going to make you be like, I want to watch this movie. But yeah, let me know. Are you going to see the Toxic Avenger? Do you remember that character? Do you have any fond memories watching that movie? I remember really liking it, and I watched it on that like Joe Bob's USA Network thing. I don't remember exactly what it was called. But if you watch that too, let me know. I think that shaped a lot of our minds to watch Joe Bob on USA late night. I think it was like Friday and Saturday night or something like that. Good times back then. Good times. But yeah, let me know. Are you a fan of the Toxic Avenger, and will you be watching the reboot film? All right, so now I'll get into my mini reviews. The first one I'm going to talk about is No One Will Save You. Again, I'm not going to go over spoilers, so if you haven't seen this film or the next couple that I'm talking about, don't worry, I don't intend to spoil anything. If I do, you can kill me in the comments, but I really don't intend to. And if you don't want to know anything about this review, you can skip to the next one. The time codes are below, and if you just want to hear the Star Trek review, you can do that as well. But I want to talk about this film because I thought it was pretty good, and again, it's October. A lot of people will be looking for new horror movies to see. I think that this is a really good one. It's a good movie to watch if it's like dark outside and stormy and you're huddled up maybe with somebody else on the couch. I think that this is the kind of movie that would be good. And again, it's available on Hulu right now. And many of us have Hulu, so it's not a movie you have to get up and go out to see. You can just turn it on Hulu right now and watch it if you want. So the film stars Caitlin Dever, and she is from the series Justified. She's been in some other stuff too, but I definitely know her from Justified, and I know her so well from Justified that it's hard for me to remove her from that role, since she really looks so similar. Like, she didn't change her hair color or hairstyle or anything. So I'm like, wow, this looks like it exists in the Justified universe. Of course, her character has a different name, but I just thought that was, I thought she did a good job. But for me, being a fan of Justified, it was hard for me to remove her from that role. I've never seen her in anything else either, so maybe that was it. But the fact that she really looked like her character from Justified, that's just me. If you haven't watched Justified, you obviously wouldn't think that at all. But I thought she did a really good job, and this movie really is just her carrying the whole movie. It's focused on her the whole time. The film is about an alien invasion from the perspective of this one woman living in a small town. It feels very much like the recent horror film Nope. It's just got a lot of that same like atmosphere feel that Nope had, which I'm sure is probably, on purpose because Nope was such a popular movie. Or this could just be an episode of The Twilight Zone. I think that this film would fall right into like a Twilight Zone type of movie. Besides the alien invasion, there's also a mystery as to why the rest of this town despises the main character, and she hardly ever leaves the house. Like, at first, I kind of got the feeling that she was agoraphobic, and in some ways, I almost feel like the film would have worked better if she was agoraphobic, and it's hard to go into why without going into spoilers, but she's not agoraphobic, but everyone in the town hates her. This isn't a spoiler, it's in the trailer, and you don't know right away why the town feels like that. And when you do find out, again, not going into spoilers, but for me, it fell flat because it seemed just like a very convenient thing to move the story along. It's very obvious that if she had just left this town, her life would be better, but she refused to. And the reasoning behind why she refuses to leave, I think it's kind of talked about a little bit. It has to do with her mom. And I don't know, it just didn't sit well with me the whole time, especially going into the second and third act. I'm like, if you just lived in like San Diego, if you just sold that huge house, like I think she's living in Ohio. I think that's where this film takes place. If you sold that house, moved to San Diego or just somewhere else, Savannah, Georgia, your life would probably be better, but for some reason you want to stay in this town where everyone hates you. And even when you find out why, it's like, wow, I would really leave, that part kind of fell flat for me. Again, I like this movie, but just that if I want to critique it a little bit, that part of the plot line did fall flat for me. But I really liked the design of the aliens. Now, there are 4 different types of aliens at least, and all seem very familiar, like with their design, but they each have their own idiosyncrasies that make them very cool. I dig that if you're going to design an alien and it's going to be the big-eyed, kind of classic alien style, that you do a little thing different. And kind of with their movement and the way they communicate, it's really kind of creepy. Like it fits a horror film. It fits sci-fi, definitely. One of the characters has these toes that kind of move on it's giving me the willies even thinking about it. Like the way they move on the floor, it's just really odd. And especially when you're using CGI like this, if the aliens are making non-human moves, it works better. If you have to just move them around the room really quick and make them do weird stuff, it works because it just makes them really creepy. And I think the aliens were really cool. I also like that, to me at least, maybe to other people it wasn't clear to me which of the aliens is in charge, which I thought was an interesting way to go. Like I said, there are 4 different types of aliens, and to me, it seemed like any one of these 4 types of aliens could be controlling the other 3. And I think that was really interesting because it was are the aliens also just part of an invasion on their planet because these other aliens got them like they're getting us? I just thought that was kind of cool to throw that in there. And again, it wasn't just their appearance. It was the way they move, communicate, and their technology was all really interesting to me. They did things that it's definitely familiar, like tractor beams and UFOs, stuff like that you've seen in concept before. But the way they kind of apply it in this movie is a little bit different and pretty cool, I thought. Another thing that I really liked about this movie, and I think will make a lot of people like it, is that usually these sci-fi horror films, they make you wait for the action. They set up all this atmosphere. Nope, for instance, you kind of get little hints of action and this happens and you're kind of like, what is this all about? What is going on? And then it's boom, everything is happening. In this movie, it moves quick. In the first act, stuff starts to happen. And because of this, you don't even realize that there's hardly any dialogue in the film. I think I read somewhere that there's 180 words in the whole film or something like that. And when I did hear that, I was kind of a little bit iffy about the film because I don't really like artsy films. I don't like it when they just do something to do it. And I don't get that feeling in this movie. It's just because of the way the movie kind of works out that there's no dialogue and it's all atmosphere and, character movement, close-ups on somebody's face and, these crazy aliens and stuff like that. So I really liked that part of the movie, that it gets going super quick. And even though some things are a mystery all the way into the third act, it does get going with the action really quickly, that you don't sit there and you're kind of like, oh, what is going on? I don't really care. I'm going to flip to something else. I think it's hard to, flip to something else because by the end of the first act, you're already in it, which I thought was a really good idea. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the ending. Again, no spoilers, but I know that a lot of reviewers have said they like the film and they don't like the ending. I do think the ending leaves a little bit to be desired, but it doesn't ruin the movie for me. I think it's very much a Twilight Zone style ending. And because of that, and because as soon as the movie started, I got that Twilight Zone feel, I almost expected something to happen that, wasn't what I was expecting, if that makes sense. So I was kind of left like they're going to end the movie like that. That kind of sucks. But I get it, and I think it definitely fits the story. It's not like one of those right turns that it's like, oh, it's all a dream. I'll spoil that for you. It's not all a dream. It's not something crazy like that. But I do think that the ending will turn some people off, and I understand why some reviewers are like, oh my God, what a letdown. But to me, it was very Twilight Zone-esque, and again, that was my feeling of the whole project. But let me know, are you going to watch this movie? If you do, let me know in the comments what you thought. If you agree with what I said. I thought it was a good movie. It's not super long. You can watch it right now if you have Hulu, so it's something that's easily accessible. And I hope you enjoy it because, again, October, Halloween, most people are looking for new horror movies to see. So I hope you enjoy it like I did, but let me know what you think in the comments below. All right, so let's talk about the new series on Amazon Prime, Gen V. Again, this is a spin-off of The Boys. A couple of the characters appear in the show, but they don't really appear that much, and they're more in the background or like as an advertisement or something like that. So while it is definitely connected to The Boys, no real big characters show up. The first thing I'll say about this is it definitely feels like a spin-off of The Boys. You know how some spin-offs do not feel like they really inhabit the same world as the original? But this one does a good job of feeling like the original. It really feels like, even though you see pictures and statues and all these commercials and stuff of the characters that we've seen on The Boys, or some of the characters that we've seen on The Boys, the main characters and everybody that's doing stuff in this series are all new. And because of that, you know, sometimes you could be like, it could be a different tone. It could be like for a different audience. You know, The Boys are for adults. These are for kids or something like that. But it doesn't feel like that at all. Like, I was kind of worried, would this be more towards like teenagers and stuff? Teenagers should not be watching this show. I mean, I'm sure they are, but it's definitely not a CW version of The Boys, I guess is my point here. It definitely feels like it inhabits the universe that The Boys live in. The show centers around basically one character named Marie, whose power is that she can control blood. She can make it move in the air. Kind of like what Magneto can do with metal, she can do with blood. And there is another character that can control metal too. And the other characters are really cool. Her roommate can like shrink down real small. There is one character that's like the Human Torch. There's another one who can touch people and make them do what she wants. Kind of like if you watch The Umbrella Academy, I have a rumor, and then whatever she said after that, the character she was talking to would have to do, no matter how crazy or whatever. And there's a character here that all she has to do is touch people and they will listen to whatever she says. These characters, you know, they all are in college, and they all, even though they're all super powered, they all kind of fill the standard Breakfast Club archetype roles of students. Like you've got the jock, the stoner, the loner, the beauty queen, you know, kind of stuff like that. I got a real big Breakfast Club vibe from this show, which I thought was really cool. But of course, the Breakfast Club came out in the 80s, and this is now the 2020s, so everything is updated. Definitely social media plays a big part in what's going on in the story, and I think they did a good job with that, and it's really scary. I feel really bad for my kids having to grow up in this world. The characters are the best part of the series for me. Each of them feels like a person with real issues, even though, like I said, they have these amazing powers. Many characters' powers are tied to some kind of issue that teens and young adults actually face, like binging and purging or cutting or extreme drug use or, you know, living up to parents' expectations. Even though these are young, superpowered individuals, the things that they're going through, many of them are things that I envision kids are still going through today. Although, again, I don't know what kid would watch this series because it's so crazy. But it does seem very, I don't know, relevant, I guess, even though it is kind of crazy too. So I think that that was really cool. Somehow they're able to make these characters feel more grounded because of these issues that they're going through, which I think is really smart. I think that's very much on purpose. But the one kind of critique I have of just the first 3 episodes, I think there's going to be 8 episodes altogether, and the first 3 episodes were released this past weekend. I think that this franchise is starting to become a parody of itself in regard to the amount and degree of sex and violence. I understand that the way The Boys have, you know, gone about their first few seasons, that you have to up the ante every season because they have to continue to outdo themselves with the blood and the guts and then just total sexual nastiness that they do. But there's a difference, at least in my opinion, of having the choice to just kill someone by shooting them in the head and instead choosing to ram an explosive up their butt. Killing someone by shooting them in the head is boring, so we're going to blow them up and make it look all crazy. But some of the stuff they do right now it's just so crazy that it's actually taking away, at least for me, the good story that they're telling. Like I said, these characters are good without all this crazy like violence and sex stuff. And sometimes this stuff happens and it takes away from what's going on screen, at least for me. I get that there's going to be a segment of the audience that is just there for the extreme sexual gratuity and the gratuitous violence. I get that the writers have to now pacify them because that's been their bread and butter so far. But for instance, and again, this is no spoilers, and I'm going to try and do this no spoilers, but there is a scene where one character is about to get caught and is saved by another. The character that saves the other does so by getting the people chasing them to recreate this insane sexual act that she has to explain in detail because actually one of the characters ends up explaining it too, which is crazy. And afterwards, the character that's making them do this, she feels exhausted and she falls over and it looks like, she may even die. The whole time I'm sitting there thinking, why don't you just tell them to go to sleep? If you just would have told them to go to sleep and not had to reenact this huge thing, then you probably wouldn't have just passed out and had all these problems. But you have to do this huge thing because the audience expects it, right? You have to do this crazy sex stuff, or it's like, how is this The Boys? How does this exist in The Boys universe if you're not doing all this crazy stuff? Again, I don't think it actually adds to the story itself. I think that in that moment, it was kind of a tense moment, and then you have that, and it just took me out of it. I was like, oh, really? Come on, man. All this good stuff is happening. We're getting character development. We're seeing new characters, and then you got to do something like that, and you're obviously appealing to a certain fan base. So to me, in my opinion, and in my experience, this is how we get Jason in space. Think of the Friday the 13th franchise. You had the first Friday the 13th, where there wasn't even Jason, spoiler alert. And then you got Friday the 13th 2, and now you have Jason, this unstoppable monster. And then 3 gets crazier, 4 gets crazier. You got Jason Goes to Manhattan. Now you've got Jason Goes to Space. Now you've got Jason versus Freddy. You just have to up it to just an amazing point every time you come back to the plate, and it ruins kind of what you started with, because now you're just a parody. You're just a parody of what you started. So I am kind of fearful that The Boys, in a very short amount of time, is going to just, like I said, be kind of ridiculous, and you can't take it seriously. And if you're going to be like that, then lean into that. Then don't give me characters that are good. Don't give me characters that I'm going to care about. Give me disposable, just, whatevers that can get killed and can do whatever. And then I will just like that show like that. But again, I know there are some people that watch The Boys. They're like, no way, I want to see all the crazy stuff. And I get that. But in my opinion, this is how we get Jason versus Freddy. This is how we go from a really good horror movie that makes you think about some stuff to just a satirical piece of nonsense. All in all, I think Gen V is worth a watch, and it's on Amazon Prime right now if you have it. So let me know in the comments below if you've watched this, if you're a fan of The Boys, and what you think of the series so far. All right, so now let's talk about a film that I've really been looking forward to called The Creator, and it was just released this past week. It is directed by Gareth Edwards, who is known for Godzilla 2014 and the Star Wars film Rogue One. The film stars John David Washington, who you may know from Tenet. Also stars Gemma Khan, who you may know from The Eternals. Ken Watanabe, who's been in many films like The Last Samurai. The movie is basically John David Washington's character and a child actor who I don't know what their name is, but they did a fantastic job in this movie. It really follows them for most of the movie. The movie is an alternate past, present, and future story that's about a war between AI and the United States. In the movie, we have been using robots to help us since the 1950s, and their abilities have continued to grow to the point where there are now beings known as simulants that have a human face and other human features. In 2055, a nuclear bomb goes off in Los Angeles, and the United States moves to ban all AI because of this, and also hunt down these robots in any other country. The country of New Asia is harboring the nucleus of the creation of this advanced AI, and by proxy, the United States declares war on the region and is in an armed conflict with them. A man who was injured in the nuclear blast in LA, losing his arm and leg, which are now prosthetic, is sent to find the leader of the AI. In doing so, they learn that the AI have developed something that can destroy a space station that the United States uses to fight against the AI, named Nomad. The man named Joshua is tasked with finding this new technology and destroying it, which appears to be a young simulant. Now, at first, this film seems very familiar, but as it goes on, you can start to realize the concepts that it's trying to portray on screen, and they are quite provocative and meaningful in regard to our current place in history. I mean, you definitely see the influence of people like Ridley Scott and Neil Blomkamp. I think I'm saying his name wrong, but I may be saying it right. He's the guy who did like District 9. After seeing the movie, I also felt like it was like Apocalypse Now, kind of like the Terminator meets the Vietnam War, because the movie takes place in this continent called New Asia, which is, I think, supposed to be China. And you really get that point of view. You don't just get the U.S. point of view. You get the view of the people inhabiting the land, that have been attacked by the United States. And I felt like a real Vietnam War kind of feel because of that. And again, you've got robots everywhere. The United States doesn't really use robots. There's one scene at the end where they do, but the people around the world still do. They don't view what happened in LA like the United States does. And that made me think about September 11th and how the United States is viewed by the rest of the world. Gareth Edwards is not an American director. He is from England, I believe. So he does not have kind of the American point of view like I do. And I thought that that was really interesting. You kind of see how the rest of the world views the United States, you know, the exceptionalism and stuff like that, and the policing around the world. And they lean heavy into that. They definitely talk about those themes and stuff like that. That's kind of what I was talking about when I said, you think the movie's going to go one way with the sci-fi concepts, and it really pulls in some other stuff that you're like, whoa, I never really think I've seen this in a sci-fi film. I mean, I definitely felt like Blade Runner 2049. There was some stuff like that. You've got the simulants, which sound like replicants, you know, from Blade Runner. So there's definitely a lot of Blade Runner. I think a lot of Ridley Scott just in this movie. You could definitely see Ridley Scott directing this movie for sure. I thought that was kind of cool how they worked in, you know, the American exceptionalism into the plot line of the story and showed it from both sides. You know, it wasn't just America's bad. They kind of explained why America would act like this. And I know it's fictional, but they're 100% right. Like the things that happen in this movie and kind of the turn of events, I think that they were very spot on with what would happen and kind of what we've seen happen. And I think that, again, they don't just say America's wrong. They show why America would act the way they do. And they make a very good point, I think. They show a very human side of it. It's not dollars and cents. I don't think money is brought up at all in the whole entire movie. But, you know, they show how fear and you fear what you don't understand and trying to control nature, trying to control the world itself, trying to control Earth itself, how that works out. I thought that was really smart and I really liked it. So one thing I didn't really like was the person that they're looking for is not a big mystery. Like the movie starts with the main character has to kind of look for this person, but they don't know who it is, quote unquote. If you have watched the film up until that point, I think it's impossible not for you to realize who that person is. And it's to the point where I was like, how do you on screen how have you not figured this out? If I'm sitting here and I've seen what you've seen, like, how have I figured this out and you have not figured this out? But the way that plays out in the third act, it's really smart. Like, again, it's not the way I thought it was going to go. And I really thought I had it pegged. And it starts going that way. It starts going that way. They just pull the rug out from under you right when you think you know what's going on. So I like that. One thing that I didn't like, they kind of twisted it a little bit. I think they could have done that a little bit better still. I mean, this movie is not without its faults. It's not the greatest movie that's ever come out. It's not the greatest sci-fi film that's ever come out, but it's definitely really good. It's probably one of my favorite sci-fi films that's come out since Blade Runner 2049. I really like the concepts that it makes you think about. AI is very prevalent right now. I mean, the writer's strike and the actor's strike has a lot to do with AI, but this goes way deeper into what AI could develop into and talks about how AI could be a form of human evolution, or I guess just evolution on the planet. And it really makes you think, not maybe since the Matrix, you know, like kind of some of those concepts about, you know, what came first, the chicken or the egg. It makes you think about, is this the end? You know, like, is us creating AI now a new beginning, or is it the ending? You know, it really makes you think. I thought this movie also had great performances by the main characters. John David Washington does a great job. Again, I said it was him and basically this kid through most of the movie, and they're awesome. You really feel their bond. They do something that really bonds them together at the end, that really pulls at your heartstrings. And I thought that they did a really good job together. One thing that's a little like, I don't know, I guess it was off-putting for me, was that John David Washington is the son of Denzel Washington. You probably already know that. But he really doesn't look like his dad at all and doesn't move like his dad at all and doesn't really remind you of his dad at all. But for me, whenever he tried to be nice, through most of the movie, he's sullen and, you know, he's a soldier and he's working on stuff and he's trying to find people. But there's a few times where he's trying to be like jovial and nice and happy. And whenever he did that, man, he sounds exactly like his dad. He sounds exactly like Denzel Washington for me. But let me know if you've ever seen John David Washington in anything, if you think he sounds like Denzel. I think normally he doesn't. I think normally he does his own thing, but whenever he's trying to be happy and I don't know, he just, to me, is like, oh my God, you sound just like your dad. It's so crazy. And one performance in particular that someone I didn't even know was in this movie, and she did a phenomenal job, Allison Janney. I did not think that she could go to the places that she went to. She's a bad guy in this movie, and she's very believable. Again, she's on the human side, so you kind of see some of the human perspective through her eyes. And through her eyes, I think it's very easy to take her side. She does a very good job of making that point, and kind of what I was talking about before, and how the movie doesn't just show you, oh, America's horrible and they're destroying the world. No, I think it does show you why, at least in the context of this storyline, why the United States would act the way it does. And from her, you get a lot of it. And I thought she did a phenomenal job. It's a part that I've never seen her do before. And she's usually like a socialite or a lawyer or something like that. And she is not afraid to get dirty in this movie. And it's really, I think, stunning. I think she did a great job in this movie. And I hope that people talk about her, because I really think that Allison Janney did a phenomenal job in this movie. But all in all, I think that this movie is worth going to see in the theaters. The creator has some great sci-fi concepts. I don't know that the sci-fi stuff alone is going to blow you away. Like the robotics and stuff, it is very familiar. Some of the concepts around that are familiar. The plotline is pretty good. There's one part towards the end that I thought was pretty convenient, and I can't talk about it without going into spoilers. And that one part, I wish they could have gotten from like B to C a different way. But that was standing. I still thought it was a great film. The ending is phenomenal. Again, it makes you think about things that you're not going to expect to think about walking into the movie. In my opinion, if you're watching someone's art, that's a very high compliment to say. So I think you should definitely go watch The Creator. If you've seen it, let me know what you thought in the comments below. Don't put any spoilers for other people that haven't seen it. Again, I haven't listed any spoilers, hopefully, in my review. So I hope that you will go see it, and let me know what you think of The Creator in the comments below. All right, so now I'll get into my final review today, and that is of the 5th episode of the 4th season of Star Trek Lower Decks, titled Empathological Fallacies. First, I did do a breakdown of the episode, and in it, if you're not familiar with my breakdown videos, I just point out all the Easter eggs and references real quick that happened in the episode, and I think there were a lot of funny ones in this episode. So you should definitely check out that video after this one if you have not yet. But this week, the USS Cerritos is tasked with transporting 3 Betazoid diplomats to Risa. Also, Boimler is stressing over his new promotion, so Rutherford and Shax share with him some secret training. The crew of the Cerritos start to act out on their emotions more so than usual, and at first it is thought that the Betazoid diplomats are the cause, who turns out are not diplomats at all, but highly skilled Betazoid intelligence agents. Hijinks, of course, ensue until we learn that it is the new lower decker T'Lyn that is causing everyone to lose control over their emotions because she no longer wants to serve on a Starfleet ship. Mariner is able to talk her down, just as Rutherford and Shax are able to calm Boimler down, and the ship continues on. I thought this was another good episode. I don't think it was the greatest episode of Lower Decks ever. I saw a lot of reviews where people are saying it was not a good episode, which surprised me. I don't know why anyone would think this was not a good episode. I thought it was funny. I like how the series seems to be taking a page from Strange New Worlds and going to a different planet or dealing with a different alien race each week. I know that they've done that before, but it really seems like they're leaning into it this season, where, last week we got the Orions and we've seen other stuff earlier in the season, and now we get to see these 3 Betazoid women. It really made me feel like Strange New Worlds, like it reminded me of them going to a different place every week, and I like that Star Trek. I like seeing new things, but I also like going back and learning more about cultures and aliens that I don't know that much about, and I love seeing more Betazoids, and I also liked how all 3 of them were basically Lwaxana Troi. Like I talked about in my breakdown, the most famous Betazoid is Deanna Troi, who of course served on the USS Enterprise D on the Next Generation. Although my favorite Betazoid would have to be Lon Suter, who served on the Voyager. If you have not seen his episodes, those are some of the best Voyager episodes there are. Lon Suter was played by Brad Dourif, who also was the voice of Chucky in the Child's Play movie franchise. He does a great Betazoid, and it's way different than any Betazoid that we've seen before. So if you have not seen I don't know that name of the episodes off the top of my head, but just Google Lon Suter, Suder, and whatever episodes he is in, definitely watch those, because he has some good ones, and he is a lot different than any Betazoid we have seen anywhere else. I thought this was another strong episode for T'Lyn, and an episode that was essentially hers. The way they're showing her this season, I understand that you don't want a new character to fade into the background, but it almost seems like they're propping her up so she might be able to take over for one of the 4 main characters. I hope that's not happening, but I know that, for instance, Jack Quaid is super busy with way bigger projects now than Lower Decks, so I hope they don't write off Boimler and add T'Lyn. It does almost feel like they're propping T'Lyn up a little much this season. While I love that character, I hope that her being a part of the show doesn't come at the cost of another character. But having said that, I do feel like this season of Lower Decks, we're getting more of the crew. Like, they're showing up more every week. We're seeing Shax, Dr. T'Ana, Captain Freeman was a big part of this episode, and I like that. There's a lot of talented voice actors on Lower Decks, and it's great for them to be able to show. And especially Shax. I know that that's like now a fan favorite character that everyone loves when Shax turns up on screen. But Dr. T'Ana, I think, especially this season, has been showing up a lot more. It seems like almost every episode that we see her, and Captain Freeman is showing up not just at the beginning of the episode or not just in scenes with Mariner. We're seeing her do other things. So I like that. I'm glad that we're seeing more of the crew, and I hope that that continues throughout the rest of the season and forward. At the end of the episode, Captain Freeman is given an image of the ship that has been destroying all the vessels. Now, we have had a reference to this vessel in every episode except one, and that was the episode where the Cerritos went to the advanced AI place. And in my podcast about that episode of Lower Decks, I theorized that the only reason we didn't hear about the ship was because the race of aliens that we didn't see in that episode of Lower Decks was somehow responsible or somehow tied to this vessel that is destroying all these ships this season. So every week I've kind of talked about how I think that this ship is some kind of amalgamated form of AI from Badgie, Agamus, and Peanut Hamper. I do think the ship looks a little bit like a shuttlecraft. So I think that it could be like a rejuvenated Yosemite shuttle. The Yosemite was the shuttlecraft for the USS Cerritos before it got destroyed in the second season. And now they use the Yosemite 2. And the fact that, like I said, it looks like a shuttlecraft and that they've made such a point of us looking at the Yosemite 2 this season, I think that they could be connected. I also think now that maybe Brad Boimler's clone could be involved. We didn't really hear much about him after he supposedly died, and I think they said that he could be a part of Section 31. So maybe Brad Boimler's clone is also somehow involved. I really do think this is just going to be a mix-up of all like these different characters, and it'll just be like a who's who of bad guys that Lower Decks have faced. And I think that Brad Boimler's clone could somehow be involved. Maybe Rutherford's like latent personality could be involved too. I think that like this villain is probably going to be like all the ramifications of silly stuff that the Lower Decks crew has done over the first few seasons, and that's why the Cerritos will be, the one that has to take it down. We are past the halfway point of the season of Lower Decks, so towards the finish line, we probably will be seeing more and more of this ship going forward. But let me know, what did you think of this episode of Lower Decks? Did you think it was a strong episode, or did you think it was a weak one? Like I said, I saw some reviews out there that said it was a weak one, but I really don't understand why. The 3 voice actors who did the Betazoid women were all really great. I thought that the B-plot was really good with Shax and Rutherford and Boimler, and I enjoyed it. I laughed, I thought it was good. But let me know, do you have any theories about the villain this season, and what did you think of the episode of Lower Decks? Well, that's all I have this time. Thank you very much for joining me. If you're still here, please hit that like button. It really does help support this little channel. I very much appreciate you watching, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?